this is one of the common question we receive from our customer, how I can securely allow the workloads running in EKS cluster to access AWS services, so without worrying about maintaining long-lived credentials. So ideally, there are like two ways you can allow your application to securely access AWS services with short-term credentials. The first one is the EKS Pod Identities. The another one is the IAM Roles for service accounts. I'll focus on EKS Pod Identities here because that's the recommended way now to allow application to securely access the AWS services. It also solves some of the scalability and reusability issues in the IAM Roles for service account. So EKS Pod Identity was introduced back in January 2023. So it allows the cluster administrator to configure Kubernetes applications to receive IAM permissions required to connect with AWS services outside the cluster. So the EKS Pod Identity provides credentials to your workload with an additional EKS Auth API with the help of an agent running in each node. So ideally, you will be using an SDK to access the AWS services in your code. So when you write your code, you create a client for an AWS services with an SDK. So by default, the SDK searches the chain of location to identify the credentials it can use. So the EKS Pod Identity is added into the credential provider. So if you're using the previous version of the SDK, it will not work. So you need to update your SDK to the latest version for the EKS Pod Identity to work. When the workloads get started and when it's trying to access any one of the AWS services, it looks for the credential chain, and then if it sees the EKS Pod Identity in the chain, then it will use. So the EKS Pod Identity is at the end of the chain. So if you're using the previous mechanism, like using the static credentials or any other mechanism to allow the application to access AWS services, you can still continue to work. With EKS Pod Identity, it allows you to safely migrate from your previous mechanism to EKS Pod Identity mechanism. So when you deploy your workloads, Kubernetes selects which node your pod needs to run. And then the EKS Pod Identity agent running in the particular node uses the ASIM role for identity action to retrieve temporary credentials depending on the service account, IAM role assigned to that workload, and then it provides the temporary credentials to the workload to use. So if you look into the difference between the EKS Pod Identity and IAM role for service account, one of the major differences like you don't need to update the trust policy for each new cluster. So the role you're going to create can be used across multiple clusters within the same account. So that's not possible with the IAM roles for service account. Also, like you don't need to set up separate IAM or ADC provider for each cluster. So you can just use one. You don't need anything. Also, like role scalability, as I said, like you don't need to define a separate trust relationship between IAM roles and service account, which is required in the IAM roles and service account. Also, when it comes to role reusability, you can use the same roles across multiple clusters, across multiple namespaces within the same cluster. Also, another key difference when it comes to EKS Pod Identities, it's only supported in Amazon EKS. You can't use it in EKS anywhere, Red Hat OpenShift services on AWS, but the IAM roles for service account can be used. So if you're planning to run workloads in EKS anywhere or self-managed Kubernetes clusters on EC2, then you need to use IAM roles for service account. Also, like the EKS Pod Identity is supported only from version 1.34. So if you're running previous version, then you can't use EKS Pod Identity. I'll quickly share my screen and then show you a quick demo about how you can provision. You can provision EKS Pod Identity to your workloads. Okay, let me share my screen. So for this demo, I have already provisioned an EKS cluster, which is running in 1.27 version. So before you start provisioning, the first step is like go to the add-ons and then you click on get more add-ons. You can do this everything at Terraform. So for the simplicity, I'm just showing it in the UI. So you go to the EKS Pod Identity agent section, you select that one, and then you can just click next, and then you just create. What it does is like it deploys a daemon set in your cluster. I've already connected to my cluster. So if you look into this one, you can see, it's just deploy daemon set. So I have two nodes in the cluster. So it deployed two pods and one pod in each node. So it deployed an identity agent pod. This is the pod that will be responsible for providing the temporary credentials required for your workloads. So I have no workloads are currently running. So I have created this simple deployment, which is just a simple AWS CLI-based deployment. So I also created a Kubernetes service account here. the EKS Pod Identity Demo Service account in the default namespace. The next step is like you need to create an IAM role for that service account to assume. For this, what I have done is like already created a service account, IAM role. So if you go to the EKS Pod Identity Demo, this is a simple IAM role, and which provides only read-only access to the S3 buckets, nothing, no more access here. If you look into the trust relationship, you need to update the trust relationship so that the pods can assume this IAM role. So you need to add the service pods.eks.amazon.aws.com. So you need to add this trusted entity policy to all the IAM role, which can be used by your workloads. So once you have the refreshes, so the identity agent daemon is successfully deployed. The next step is to configure the pod identity association. So this is where we are going to link the Kubernetes service account into the AWS IAM role. So currently I don't have any identity association. So if I click create here, so you select which IAM role you want to use. So I'm going to use the EKS Pod Identity Demo IAM role, and you select which namespace you're going to deploy the workload. So I'm deploying workloads in default namespace. I'm going to select here, and then you need to select the Kubernetes service account. So EKS Pod Identity Demo service account. So once you click create, so it automatically creates the pod identity association. So everything happens through via the EKS RT API. So there's no IAM APIs coming in place. So that's like another advantage. So when you click the pod identity associations, you can see one created. So let's go back here. Now let's deploy the sample workload, which may take a second to get deployed. So it's already running. So now let's exec into the workload. So if I try to list the configuration, you can see it automatically created a temporary credentials for the workload. So now if I try to run the AWS commands here, so I should be able to successfully access the AWS S3 bucket. So if I try to access any other service, for example, let's try some other for any other service it should fail. Let's go with some list instances, put the command details here. That's the instance. Let's try some other command and see if it works. It should fail. Normally you should see the unauthorized operation. So it safely allows the application to access only the service which it has been granted access to. If you look into the workload, the pod, okay, let's get the pod name here. And if you look into the pod description, you can see at the pod identity, there's a mutation webhook that automatically injected the additional environment variable that requires for the EKS pod identity to securely generate the temporary credentials. So that's how it works. So EKS pod identity is the recommended way now to allow workloads to securely access the AWS services. That's it from my end.